Hi, I'm Connie Whitman, your host, and you're listening to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.net. So, as usual, I'm very excited that you're joining us today. The show is all about inspiring you to desire changing something in your life, whatever that is for you. So, I start with my motivational quote, and today it's by Socrates, and he says, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new." So, how many of you have your story that you often use to define you? Think for a second, is the story a positive story or maybe a negative and perhaps limiting one? I'll bet most of your stories are negative, and you all know what I'm talking about. That darn negative record player that sounds so familiar that we oftentimes forget what it's actually saying to us. Like examples, I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm afraid. The recordings play on. And we always want to recount the challenges we face on how the world maybe has done us wrong instead of focusing on perhaps a positive story. So are you ready to quit and silence that recording, change your story, and live the life that you know you're meant to live? Well, get ready as my brilliant and wonderful guest, Flippen and I are going to discuss how you can change your story. Now, Flip is an entrepreneur and a lead author of Your Third Story, The Life You Were Meant to Live, and the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Flip Side, Break Free of the Behaviors That Hold You Back. He's also the founder of the Flippen Group, one of the fastest growing and largest educating training corporation in the world. His company trains corporate talent, team development, and companies throughout the United States as well as internationally. Now, since founding the Flippen Group in 1990, Flip has led the development of breakthrough educational curricula and processes that are used in thousands of schools nationwide, making them the largest education training company in North America. Additionally, the company's business division works with Fortune 500 companies and multinational corporations, while the sports division works in talent development and selection from some of the most recognized professional, Olympic, and college teams in the world. Now, Flip and his wife, Susan, who is the CEO and his boss of the Flippen Group, were named Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. Just wonderful. Please help me welcome my amazing guest, Flip, to the show. So, Flip, thank you for being on. I truly am honored to have you and excited to talk about the book.
It's good to be with you. Thanks for having us.
Oh, a true pleasure. So first, can you tell us a little bit about your journey that brought us here to talk about the book today?
Well, yeah, and thanks. That's such a great question. We're all so much alike. I mean, if you stop and think, if I said, "So, Connie, tell me about your life." Well, you're going to start out by saying, "Well, I was born here, and I went to school here, and I grew up here, and this is what I did. These are the activities I was involved in, et cetera." And my story is very much the same way. We have this first story in our life, but the interesting thing about that story, Connie, is that I didn't write that story. I was born into that story, but I didn't write that story. So I didn't author that story. It's certainly a very defining part of the early part of my life, but I didn't write it. And so that in that first part in my life, I grew up in a small town, and my family were professional people and fourth generation Texas ranching. And so, I have a strong background in that sense, but we had a lot of secrets in our home, and it was a lot of dysfunction and things like that. It was not a happy place in our house. Personally, socially, I got along great and had a great time and loved sports and that sort of thing. But that first story had a lot of complexity to it that I wouldn't wish on anybody, but I'm thankful that I had it.
Yeah, because it's part of your story that does make you who you are today, and all the things that make you think and thrive of what you want to do in the future. So foundationally,
Yep.
it works. Now, what was the inspiration from writing your third story, which is really interesting?
Well, thanks for that. Connie, it's interesting to me because you look at that first story, and, there's so many people I know. I mean, I could go back to my hometown, and there's some people that are still stuck in that first story. their family defined who they are and where they go and what they do, and they never got out of that. And but there's this second story that is so fascinating to me, because that's where the deceptions really begin to take place. And if we talk about the third story, we've really got to talk about that second story, because that's the biggest challenge for us. In the second story, we begin to tell ourselves stories, and a whole lot of those stories are lies. They're just not true, which is candidly very sad, because I stop and look at my own life and I think, okay, so why didn't I do this? Well, I had a story for why I didn't do something, and I had a story for why I did do something. But I back up and I look at some of those stories, and Connie, they weren't true. They were things I was telling myself so that I'd feel okay. I'd be acceptable to my friends. I wouldn't be in a spot where I could fail. It was a safe route and that sort of thing. And the sad thing about that second story is it makes your life small. It just does. It's, just think about it, Connie. Why are you doing what you're doing right now? How do you have thousands of listeners from all over the world? And you could have just continued to tell yourself, well, I'm going to live this little tiny life and it's okay. And the story you tell yourself is, well, I'm really happy and I'm feeling pretty successful and things are really pretty good for me and life is nice and okay. But those are things you tell yourself so that you can stay like you are. And you kick the walls out of that and look at what you're doing.
It's true. And at first the fear sets in, right? Isn't that the core of why we hold ourselves back? And I remember when I was approached by the owner of Web Talk, I was like, I can't do that. What do I know about hosting a show? How am I going to find guests? Oh, I can't do that. That's your immediate, right, feeling. And then the upside is, well, what if I do it? What's the upside of that? So I fail. Big deal. I do it for a year, right? You sign the contract, do it for a year. You move on. I'll learn something from it. But that initial, I don't think I can do it. Why? And I know you speak about this all the time, and I loved the book. I thought it was absolutely, and Flip, I just want to say, I think the reason I love the book so much is because you organized the book talking about that first story, second story, and why it's so important that we take control and write that third story, because really, tomorrow is a blank slate. We can write anything we want on that blank piece of paper. Why, when you speak, why do you emphasize the importance of understanding the first and second story, but putting it into that perspective?
Well, Connie, what you're saying is really at the crux of it. Just go back to what you just said. So the producer or whoever it was came to you and said, Connie, what about? Well, you could have easily stuck with that story. You could have said, well, gosh, I haven't done that before, and I don't know a whole lot about that, and it might not work, and golly, I don't know how I'd get guests, and you could tell yourself all that stuff. Most people tell themselves those things, Connie, but here's the catch. They don't ever challenge them. They believe them, they accept them, and that's where they live. And so when you really stop and look at your life, you just think about all the things people tell themselves. I was with a couple the other day, and we were talking about their marriage, and they said, well, we've really got a good marriage. And I was like, so tell me what a good marriage is. And the more they talked, I said, well, what would a great marriage look like for you guys? And they're like, well, and of course it's dawning on them now that they have a good marriage, but they don't have a great marriage. And it's like, so would you want a great marriage? Oh gosh, yeah, we would. Well, what would that look like? And then they started talking about it. And I said, what would keep you from having a great marriage? And, it's just the things that we never challenge. We tell ourselves our stories. We say we're okay where we are. I like my job. You like your job. Gosh, what would I love my job look like? Do you really like your job, or is it that you're just afraid of a change, or you're afraid of trying something new? So there's stories all through our lives that we should be challenging. It could be work. It could be our role as a parent, as a spouse, as a friend, as a colleague. I think people just, they don't let themselves dream. And I'm a fanatic about that.
Yeah, and the book emphasizes this. And the funny thing, as you were speaking, I was thinking of the quote, right, good is the enemy of great. because when things are good, we're like, it's
Yeah.
good, it's good. We don't step out because it's good. We become quite complacent. When things are bad, that's when we think, I really need to do something differently. So good is truly the enemy of great. And complacency, I think, is what holds us back. And the biggest thing is fear. Fear is what drives us. And I think is demotivating, even though it can motivate us to do nothing. And the recent statistic in the Gallup poll, it's 70% of Americans, and I'm going to do this in quotes, hate their job. You hate your job, yet you're stuck in it and you're doing the same thing over and over. So how does that self-talk that we're talking about in that second story, how does that affect that third story that you emphasize, blank slate, write a new tomorrow? What's the effect on that?
Well, I mean, Connie, honestly, I mean, you just touched on one of the biggest things. Can you imagine that in this country, okay, we're not living in Russia or China or Venezuela, we're living in America, and we're sitting here with 70% of people that hate their jobs? And I'm like, why would you do that? I mean, you only get one shot at this deal. There's not do-overs on this. And I see people all the time, they're burning up 30 and 40 years of their life in something that they're not in love with. And they do it because it's safe. They are afraid. They are not sure what would happen, uncertainty. They've had things in their past that have happened that didn't work, and so they have shame that carries forward with that, or they're blaming themselves. Gosh, I put my family at risk. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, do you have any idea what could happen if you just let yourself go? Let yourself dream. And yes, I do know there's risk involved in that, but those risks are much less than the loss you have doing something that is not fulfilling.
And the funny thing is, if you try it, the upside potential might be extraordinary, yet we're afraid to take that next step. I remember I was 39. We had my kids were babies. I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, mortgage. We needed my income. New Jersey's not cheap to live in. And I was downsized in my organization. They eliminated my position. And I remember coming home to my husband, again, picture it, 2 kids, a mortgage, we need our income. And I said to my husband, you know what? I want to start a business. We're married, Flippen will be January of 2020. We'll be married 28 happy, wonderful years. He gets me. Clearly he gets me, Flip. But he said to me, what do you want to do? And I had a business plan written, and I thought about it. I needed the opportunity to present itself so that I could step into that next role and still be able to pay a mortgage and all of those things. But you have to dream, you have to think, and then the opportunity always presents itself. You just have to be aware of it. And I think we put blinders on. We're so afraid of seeing the upside potential. So I'm sure you see that with your clients too, right, Flip?
Well, Connie, what you're saying is so true. I mean, you could have come home and said, look what happened to me. Look what was done to me. And you can spend the rest of your life being a victim. I'm telling you, I mean, that is the stupidest thing that I see people do. I mean, when I saw patients for so many years, I would see people that have been raped, that have been brutally assaulted, that have gone through horrific things. And going through that grief process, I totally understand that. And I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've wept with patients over things that have happened. But here's the deal. You have to come to a point where you say, I'm not going to let that continue to victimize me today. Whatever it is that happened to you in the past, if you're reliving it every day, you're allowing that to dictate your entire life. And so even with our children, we have 20 children, Connie. We've raised kids from all over the world, and a lot of our kids have come out of really tough backgrounds. And I'll cry with them, and I get it. I get pain. Believe me, I understand that. I worked with gangs for years and all that. But here's the deal. There's a point where you've got to say, you know what, this is my life. This is my life. And I'm not going to live it that way. I'm going to look forward. I'm going to stop and say, what can I do with my life? I mean, our youngest son comes out of a really tough situation. He just finished his surgical residency as a dentist. Now, he was a little disappointing. We thought he was going to be a doctor, but he's a dental surgeon. It's okay.
I love it.
But truthfully, I mean, if you let your past define your life, you're going to live a small life. And there's more. There's more. And all you've got to do is just take a hard look at that and say, you know what? So, Connie, if I said, have you been to Zimbabwe, or have you been to Ghana, or have you been to Mexico City, or Guatemala, or Peru, or Machu Picchu, or pick a place, your answer should always be, not yet. It's never no.
Yes.
It's not yet.
Yes.
Have you done it? Not yet. You know, have you bungee jumped? Not yet. Have you skydived? Not yet. Have you started a company? Not yet. I mean, open it up and think about what you can do. It's the coolest life in the world. I just got back from Zimbabwe.
That's awesome. I know you're always on a plane. You're like the traveling Woolbury out there, right? The stewardess probably know you, or the flight attendant, probably know you when he's back, right? He's on my flight again. I love it.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's
that's
true.
Right.
Not yet. I haven't done that yet.
That's
What just by flipping that one thing from no to not yet, it opens up the gamut of possibility. So now, let me ask you a question, Flip, because this is big, and I know we're peers, right? We're not just starting this journey. I say, when people say I'm seasoned, I say, yes, I'm hot and spicy. So we're hot and spicy, Flip, okay? What does the social media play into the perception, I guess, of ourselves? And how do you, when you speak with your clients, how do you help them combat that? Because it's everywhere.
You know, I mean, we live in this world of comparisons. We really do. It's like, you know, I mean, I think about every little girl in America, Connie. This to me is one of the saddest things. But every little girl in America goes through the checkout line with their mom every week at the grocery store. And right there are all these magazines that are airbrushed, and here's the perfect body and the perfect rear end and the perfect whatever, you know. And you look at that and you go home as an 8, 9, 10-year-old little girl, and you're like, I don't look like that. And you carry that image with you the rest of your life. You know, you're like, I'm not pretty like that. I'm not desirable. I'm not special. I'm not, you know, and I think about how so many of these outside influences impact us. And I just want to stop and say, sweetheart, you're 8 years old. You know, you're 8 years old. And you look just like an 8-year-old ought to look. God bless you. I just love how you are. And you stop and think, you know, we are who we are. We all have so many unique gifts and talents and abilities. And I don't want the world writing the script for my life. I don't want my mother writing it, even though she said some good things. She said a lot of really negative things. I don't want that. I want to take that and challenge that. And Connie, I don't want to stand here and, I mean, people, when I speak, you know, people will say, oh my gosh, you know, he's got a great company and a great life and a great marriage and great children. And that's all true. But let me just tell you something. I'm illegitimate. I'm the product of an affair. I've been beaten as a kid. I've been fired from a company that I built, a nonprofit that was horribly unjust. And I walk away from that. I could be bitter about that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to live that way. I'm thankful. I'm very thankful that I was unjustly fired from that nonprofit. And candidly, Connie, listening to you, you're thankful. I mean, I listened to you. You're thankful that you got riffed or whatever the deal was from that other deal, or you'd never be here. Here's a statement you want to think about. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't there. Yes. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't there. Now, here's the other part of that, okay? Where I am now is going to dictate where I am there. So I'm thinking about my future always. I look at my past. I see people that have dealt with all kinds of tough things. You know what that's telling you? You're tough. You know, when you're getting beat up and the world's not treating you right, you know what? You're more than a survivor. You've gone through that. You know, somebody asked me recently, Flip, are you ever afraid of losing everything? Are you kidding me? I've been poor before. I've been poor. I was fine. You know, I was no happier then than I am now. And well, what if you lost it all? You know what? Been there, done that. I'm okay.
It's exactly right.
I mean, I can't eat you, Connie.
That's true. It was funny. In New Jersey, they had this maybe a year ago, one of the lotteries was like $70 million or some, you know, exorbitant number. And they had Mark Cuban from Shark Tank on. one of the local radio stations, and they asked him. They said, $70 million. What do you recommend? So that was one winner, and they hadn't come forward yet. He said, first and foremost, get a good tax attorney. Okay, that's number one. Number two, if you were miserable before you won the 70 million, you're going to be miserable with the 70 million. If you were happy before the 70 million, you're going to be blissfully happy with the 70 million. So your perception, your perspective of life, no matter whether you're poor, like you said, or you're rich, you have your family, you have, and here's the other thing too, Flip. Let's say you did lose everything. You still have you still have your skill. You can still turn around and rebuild something new. It's not when you got fired from the foundation that you built. It's not like you left behind all of that skill that brought that foundation to be as successful as it is. And I think that's the fear sets in that if that happens, what are you going to do? You brush yourself off, you stand up and you keep moving forward. It's crazy. I want to just talk briefly now, the kids. Kids are very addicted to the social media. Cell phones are their sidearms. It's like the Wild West, except we have sidearms that are cell phones. What do you tell, and as your kids were growing up, what do you tell them to quiet that social media and the number of likes I get or I don't get, right? That's how I'm validated.
Well, there's some interesting things around that, Connie. I was just with some people, without naming them, but they wrote the algorithms for a lot of these things. And so actually your likes are fed to you based on the pattern by which you look at your phone to see when the likes are. And so they're spread out so that it keeps you coming back to your phone, so they actually can predict what the patterns are so that you personally are continually coming back to your phone in the way that they want. So you kind of stop and look at that. Those things are all designed to get mind share. That's what they're after. So these pop-up ads, they're trying to get mind share. All the things that they say to you, they're trying to get mind share. They start feeding you news feeds or ads or whatever based on things that you've looked at in the past. So the algorithms are all designed. What they're after is mind share. Now, I want you to stop and think about that. If somebody else is capturing mind share, you're losing it. So if they're gaining it, you're losing it. So I stop and I think, you know what? I really don't want that stuff. I don't need whatever I talk about to pop up on an ad 30 seconds later because they've been able to listen to it. And I know for a fact they do because I built a company, and that's part of one of the things that we did was listened in on things. I've since sold that company, by the way. But here's the deal, is what do you want to believe? What do you want to think about? What do you want to do with your life? And the ends to that are boundless. They are boundless. And when I see kids, and of course we work with millions of them through our education programs. We're working with well over 6.5 million young people in school right now today in thousands of schools. But my question is what are you telling yourself is making your life small? And we have a kid recently, he told me, he said, I don't want to be on the return team playing football because I feel like I'm better in another position. And I was like, son, the reason you don't want to be on the return team is because on the return team last year you got your leg broke and you're afraid, and that's why you don't want to be on the return team. It's got nothing to do with wanting to be in another spot. And he's literally like, yes, sir, that's right. And I said, well, there's nothing wrong with that, son, but you decide what you want to do. If you don't want to play football, play soccer. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But don't lie to yourself. Don't say the reason I'm not doing that is because of this. If there's a girl that you want to ask out and you're telling yourself all kind, and Connie, I see you smiling, you were probably that girl. If you see a girl that you want to ask out and you're telling yourself, oh, I'm too busy, or I got my studies, or just go ask her. If you've got friends that you want to meet that you don't know right now, you're going to be like the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yes.
Pick the right people.
Absolutely.
This is not hard. Go build those relationships. So it's just a matter of honestly just cowboying up and doing what you have the ability to do.
So now what if some of the kids, because I think this is such an important show for kids to listen to. When I say kids, yes, absolutely young, but those teenage years where the hormones get crazy and your thoughts get crazy, but even the college kids and after college where they're graduating now, Flippen, they're saying, I don't know what to do with my life, right? What's my next step? There's so much confusion out there. And I think the colleges are doing a disservice because they're teaching a subject and they're offering all of these majors that aren't really preparing kids for school, for a life outside of school. So what do you say to kids who are introverted and think, yeah, Flip, that sounds great, and that's great for my friend who was the star football player, or for the head cheerleader, or for my friend who's great in sales because they could sell, ice to an Eskimo. I'm introverted. I can't do that. I can't do what you just described.
Yeah. So listen to what you're saying, Connie. I mean, you're just quoting people. When they start saying, I can't do that, I'm not that way, that's not who I am, I'm not made that way, I don't have those talents, I don't have that ability. I mean, listen to all of those stories that they're telling themselves. They're telling themselves those stories so they can stay small.
That's exactly right.
And by golly, if you want to stay small, don't let me get in the way. I'm like, honestly, come on, you're telling me that you're an introvert. Okay, there's nothing wrong with being an introvert. It does not mean that you cannot make friends, that you cannot go out and initiate conversations. I mean, we do this all the time with people. I see women sitting in the executive ranks and they're like, well, I don't engage like men. You don't have to engage like a man. You just have to speak up in meetings. You're generally as or more qualified. You bring immense amounts to the table. Don't sit quietly. Just speak up. You can ask questions. There are tons of ways for you to engage in this. Make your world bigger. Make your world bigger. Don't let other people define that space for you. That's the bottom line to it.
It's interesting. I was teaching a class yesterday on sales because that's my background, and the young lady, she had two little ones at home. She was maybe mid to late 20s, and I don't know what I said, and she looked at me and I said, "Well, go ahead. You want to comment? Sure. Tell me." And she said, I do that. She goes, I think, I want to, whatever the promotion is she's looking for. And she says, and immediately she thinks, what if they don't give it to me? What if I can't do it? What if they want me to relocate? What if I have to commute? What if? And I said, what if it all works out the way you want it to work out? What if?
Yeah.
So I said, you need to stop living in the what ifs of the bad. I said, because typically the bad scenario is maybe 1%. The upside is probably 99%, but you're managing your life to that one limiting percent because of fear. Don't do that. I said, that's just crazy. And the other thing I said, and I'm sure you say this to your clients, what's the worst thing that can happen? You fail.
Exactly.
And I said, as long as what you're trying to do isn't going to kill you, other than death, okay, you fail. Yeah. That's okay. You might learn from it. That's usually right. From our failures is where we, catapult to the next level of success. And I'm sure you say the same thing to your clients. People are afraid, Flip. People are afraid.
Yeah, they are, Connie. And, there's an interesting thing, too. You even talking about sales. I was with a friend of mine a while back, and he made a comment. He said, I would really, and now he's a sales guy. He's got products that are really great products. He represents a great company, and he's a good friend. He said, Flip, I'd really like to have an appointment with so-and-so, a very successful friend of mine. And I said, well, that's not a problem. I can introduce you. And so we went and we had coffee and had a really nice visit with this person. And you would know them. I mean, they're internationally renowned. And we walked out of there and he said, thank you for that appointment. And I said, Barry, let me ask you something. Did you want an appointment with him, or did you want to present your products to him and have him as a client? And he said, well, I would only hope that he could be a client. And I said, you asked for an appointment, Barry. You set your goal here when your hope would have been here, but you didn't do that. You set your goal here because you thought there was a chance that could happen. So you sold yourself short before you ever went in there. And by golly, you know what? You achieved that short goal. You really did. So next time you have a chance like that, you stop and think about the very best thing that you can take to that person. Don't set the goal down here because you know you can meet it, and that's a safe spot. Stop and think, I have great products to bring to this person that'll add value to him. And I honestly I'm honest, I'm forthright, I will do a great job. Bring yourself to the table at the highest possible level. Nobody's going to fault you for that. I mean, I just got off the phone with the head of ChickfilA, Tim Tassopoulos. He is a great guy. I want a friendship with Tim. I love their company. I love him. I love what they do. We want to be there to do nothing but add value. Now, what if I just said, years ago, oh my gosh, they would never talk to us. We'd never have a friendship. I couldn't meet somebody like that. Tim's a great guy. Why do we sell ourselves short like that? And people do it all the time, Connie. I mean, I never thought I'd get to meet somebody as cool as you. And look at
this. And back at you.
Hey, thanks.
I love it. It's funny. I use ChickfilA in a lot of my training because, and just you could give him this feedback. It's funny. And we have Chick-fil-A's everywhere, right? Even in New Jersey. I will say to the participants in my classes, do you go to Chick-fil-A? Oh, yeah. How's their customer service? And everyone says, nobody beats Chick-fil-A. And I said, that's because the culture from the top down is, instead of saying, when you say thank you to the server, whoever it is that's behind the counter, they don't say, no problem. They're trained to say, my pleasure. You're welcome. Happy to do that, right? That starts from the top down. So it's just funny that you mentioned him. I used him yesterday in training.
Hey, Connie, let me tell you a great story. And I don't even know if this is kosher. But I have a really dear friend, Horst Schulze, okay? And Horst is probably 81 now. You don't know who he is, but you really do. So when he was a boy, he lived in a very small and very poor village. I'm not even going to tell you what country. But he had heard that there was a place where people could come and sit down and somebody else would cook for them and they would pay for a meal, i.e. a restaurant. He'd never seen one. When he turned 16, he packed his bags. With his mother's blessing, he walked up the road 17 miles to a little village that had a restaurant with 5 tables in it. One night while he was bussing tables, an older gentleman came in, very distinguished, and sat down, and Horst was trying his best to act appropriate. Do you know who Horst is? Well, a few weeks after he met that gentleman, he wrote for the mission statement, they didn't call it that, ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen. And Horst Schulze is the guy who wrote the mission statement for Ritz-Carlton worldwide, has run all of them all over the world. He's the premier hospitality hotel. With Horst, he's like, Flip, I could have stayed in that little village. I could have stayed in that little restaurant with 5 tables. Yeah. But I just started thinking, it's ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen.
It's true.
I mean, we have the opportunity to think and dream so big, Connie. And honestly, I think that's what we were designed for. I mean, that's what we were created for, is to live full and rich in lives, It's good stuff.
It is. It's so appropriate and so important because we are all put here and we all have a wonderful purpose. People are afraid to examine it, I think, and expose themselves so that they can live their full purpose. And it goes back to fear and shame and all of those things from the first 2 stories. The one we're given through our parents, teachers, priests, whatever. The one that we believe, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. And I say this all the time, Flip. Our record player, I know the kids say their phone now, right? But we have a record player. And my record player has deep grooves. And I refuse to let it repeat and repeat and repeat. You have to make a choice to want to grow and want to learn. And it's interesting, Flip, yesterday, again, they were younger people in their 20s, this particular class. And I said I invited them to join on the show, follow the show. I talked about you and your book. I said I'm interviewing him, tomorrow. And I said it's a free resource. why wouldn't you commute? Why wouldn't I commute with you
right.
so you can hear these amazing authors, these amazing businessmen, these amazing thought leaders around the world that might just take your perspective from here to here. Can you imagine what happens when we go from here to here? Magic.
Yeah.
So they were all so excited. But yeah, it was funny that I was speaking about you yesterday and we hadn't even recorded the show. We're out of time, Flip, and I have to tell you, I love you. Don't tell your wife that.
Likewise.
If you guys are interested, I highly recommend this book for any age. I told Flip before we began recording, I really am going to encourage, although I can be a little demanding, that I want them to read the book. It is a quick read. I read it in one day, and I'm not that smart that I read that fast. It's that page turning that you can't put it down because it just makes sense. So go to Flip's website, yourthirdstorybook.com, and read it and write your third story. Start right now because it's just that important. Flip, I can't thank you enough for sharing your wisdom, but for writing this book. I think, honestly, I think everybody, I don't care what stage in life you are, what position you have in life, everybody should be reading it because you give some wonderful insight. And at the end, you do a little synopsis and then you give your questions. See, I love that when you give an exercise and the questions help you stop and think, what would I do? What should I think? What should I become? So it's just, it's well written, but it's well organized as well. For me, it's like a life tool, which I think is an important tool for especially for our kids today. So a great book, just great book. Again, yourthirdstorybook.com. Check it out. Everybody, really quick before we sign off, my partner and I are still offering our free communication style assessment. Go to wisdomdecoded.com. Right on that landing page, it's a free assessment. You get a little report that tells you about how you're communicating, your strengths, your superpowers, as well as your blind spots. And we give you some tips on how to overcome or shift so that you can minimize your blind spots and continue to fortify and build those strengths. So again, wisdomdecoded.com, your free communication style assessment. For Flip, check him out, yourthirdstorybook.com. Highly recommend it. Flip, I am honored. Thank you so much for being on. This was a fun interview. This was really fun.
Thanks, Connie.
A real
it's
pleasure.
Great being with you.
Real pleasure.
Great being with you.
I hope you guys will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover together how to challenge yourself. And oh, by the way, my wonderful guest today just gave you some tools on how to challenge yourself and create the change you want. Don't let good be the enemy of great for you. That's an injustice to yourself. Live big, live large. You deserve it. Thank you again for joining me. You've been listening to Enlightenment of Change with me, your host, Connie Whitman, on webtalkradio.net. Thank you, everybody. I do wish you a wonderful, inspired week. Live large. Go for it. Thanks.